Hello my friends, welcome back. If you are new here, my name is Amber Amrine. I'm a psychic medium and Reiki master in Usui, Crystal, and Karuna Reiki. We're going to be doing another Get Ready with me. I'm going to be doing my hair and my makeup, and we're going to talk about fairies. If you are unfamiliar with fairies, I recommend maybe hopping over to my podcast, Diary of a Psychic Medium. I have a few episodes about fairies, especially in the beginning of the podcast. I really break down what their realm is about. But if you just want some story time, feel free to just stay here. All right. It is raining outside. Whenever I wear this shirt, I always want to do something weird with my hair. And because it is raining, naturally, my hair is going to get crazy. So, we're going to do a messy bun mohawk. I've never actually done this before, so I'm not sure what it's going to look like, but we shall see. Okay, so in my last podcast episode, I spoke briefly about portals and vortexes, specifically opening up portals to the fairy realm in my closet. So I kind of wanted to talk about how to do that and what it does, what it's like. So the fairy realm for me, if you are new here, has always been a place of deep happiness and security. They almost acted, this is a terrible, do I care? Yes. Yes, hold on. They've always acted like, almost like family to me. I went through some sexual abuse and just some not so fun stuff growing up. And the fairy realm was always there to kind of give me a sacred space where I felt free and allowed me to reclaim my inner child and heal. So they've always been like this really wonderful little family. When I was in middle school, so about like 12, 13, I was living, my mom and I were living in this, that's too tight. It's fine. My mom and I were living in this apartment building. It was a studio. It was really small. It was the weirdest shape. It was a shape of a triangle, but like a really long, skinny triangle. It was so bizarre. So it was hard to fit very much furniture in there. And there was a big walk-in closet. There were two closets. There was one that was like a walk-in closet, and then one that was like a sliding door closet. My mom took the sliding door closet, and I had the walk-in closet. And I basically made like a little fairy shrine in there. I hung a bunch of fairy artwork. I would put little offerings for them in the closet, and I would go in the closet to meditate. Anytime I was feeling stressed out or needed some extra support and wanted to connect to them, I would go into the closet to do that. And it would essentially act like, it was like sacred space, which naturally opened up a portal to their realm. So their realm is, or opening a portal rather, into a positive realm, essentially just requires oversaturating this space with a specific intention or a specific type of energy. So anytime I was going to connect to the fairies, anytime I was feeling particularly mischievous or like embodying their energy, I would go into the closet and kind of saturate the space essentially with those vibes. And when there is an influx of a specific type of energy, naturally it's going to open up a portal. It's going to call more of that energy in, which for the fairy realm kind of allows you to call in some like little fairy neighbors. So the closet door would start to open by itself, And at first that would scare me. We lived in a lot of houses with paranormal activity. Not necessarily that the houses themselves were haunted, but it was more so there were a lot of energy beings around us, so it would kind of call them in further. And so when this started happening with my closet, at first I was a little bit spooked and I wasn't sure what exactly it was. But luckily my mom is also sensitive and said, no, I think it's the fairies. Growing up, I always had a lot of fairies coming to turn things on and, just play with my stuff. So it wasn't out of the usual, but we were coming out of a home that was haunted with some really funky energy, actually. Actually, I'll talk about that first. So we lived in this, hold on. Yeah, not too shabby. I accidentally left out a single curl, but not too shabby. I feel like my head might be a little bit too flat for this hairstyle, so I'm going to fluff it up over here. All right. So we lived in this house. Well, we lived in many houses. After my parents got divorced, my mom and I were moving around a lot. And we lived in this one house that had some funky energy in it. It was, actually, there's a lot of accounts of these types of beings. It was essentially a, tall shadow man. I never physically saw a form. I would just see him standing there, and he was wearing a coat and a black hat. And I would see his shadow at night. I'm going to add some water to these to make them curly. I would see his shadow at night staring at me in my bed, which was always very frightening. And I would try to stare at the shadow to figure out if it was something casting it, but it was the same shadow every time. And it wasn't it would move. So sometimes shadows will, if something is casting a specific shadow, it's depending on how the light is hitting it, it'll stay that way. But this thing would move. So there weren't objects that were creating the shape of this man. It was very clearly an energy being, and if I reacted to it, it would then immediately disappear. The energy of this man was very dark, very heavy, and what was interesting actually is it would only show up when my mom wasn't around. I don't think my mom ever saw it. If I reacted to it and she came into the bedroom, it would immediately disappear. What was interesting is in that apartment, I believe, I started sleepwalking, and I've never had issues with sleepwalking before. Is that a lie? No, I think that's when it started. But I would just essentially get up in the middle of the night and do really weird things. My mom would wake up. We shared the room. It was a one-bedroom apartment, so her and I shared the bed. And she would wake up, and I would just be sitting there, crisscross applesauce, staring at her. There was one time she woke up, and I was sitting crisscross applesauce, and I was, squeezing her boob. Like this. And she was like, what are you doing? And I was like, oh, never mind, forget it. And then I went back to sleep. So there was a lot of weird sleepwalking. I did notice that anytime I was very stressed out, I would sleepwalk. But it started in that apartment. Timeline-wise, there was a lot of traumatic, heavy things going on. So, it makes sense psychologically, but it was just also coincidental that this weird shadow man was in the house at the same time. And those shadow men aren't usually very good spirits. So I was going to sleep one night, and my mom was still up. She was in the living room doing some work, and I saw the shadow of the guy project on the floor by the bathroom, or it was on the floor and the wall, and I was staring at it, trying to see if it was going to move or what exactly it was going to do. And it started getting larger as if it was walking towards me. I was spooked. My mom walked in just to go to the bathroom, because in order to go to the bathroom, you have to walk through the bedroom. And I reacted, and she was like, oh, what's wrong? What were you doing? I thought you were asleep. And I was like, oh, no, I just saw this weird shadow on the floor. And of course, once she passed through, it was no longer there. The energy of that apartment was very, very heavy. I always felt very uncomfortable to be there by myself. We had these Halloween decorations that we had up in the kitchen, one of which was this like dangly, it's like those beads that you put in front of a door, but it had like RIP and like gravestones and stuff like that. And there was a sticker that I think I put on the wall in the kitchen that almost looked like a portal, like some sort of zombie was breaking into the kitchen. And every time I went into the kitchen, it literally felt like something was off. And I wasn't sure if it was just my imagination. I do have PTSD. I tend to be hypervigilant. So I was like, I think I'm just being dramatic. I think I'm just associating these Halloween decorations with something negative. But now that I'm older, I understand now that no, there was definitely something funky in there. And especially by me perceiving the kitchen as like a weird spot, there was a spirit that would stick around in the kitchen. It's very clear that, yeah, there was some weird stuff there. There were spirits that would manifest very physically. That our neighbor across the way, who's actually a good friend of mine still, I've known him since I was 10 years old, used to see. So there was a lot of weird stuff. So fast forward, we're in this tiny little studio apartment. All of the interactions I've had with spirits, for the most part, up till this time, has been a little bit more negative. Weird poltergeists, weird hauntings, things calling my name, things poking me, just stuff that scared me. I didn't fully understand energy just yet. I was still like learning and figuring out like what things are and if I could trust them. The one thing I always knew for sure though was that I trusted the fairies. So when I started designating this space, I've always liked closets to be like clubhouses. When I was a kid, I'd always like make these little I don't know, like forts and stuff, and always I was obsessed with like secret doors and portals, and so I was obsessed with them. I would draw on the in my closet. Is that too much? I would draw on the walls to like mark like a portal was there, some sort of magic button that would open this magic door was present. I was very obsessed with that. So naturally, this was the first time I've had a big closet. So I wanted to make it this like little safe haven for fairy folk. So I designated my closet to them. That's where I would leave out little treats and stuff like that. And I started to notice that the things in my closet started to move around. Little like crystals I'd have in there, or my shoes would be somewhere else. Like things were just kind of going out of place, which was a big confirmation that it was in fact fairy energy. So then from that moment forward, anytime the closet door opened by itself, I would take that as a sign from them that they wanted me to connect to them. It was like their energy was coming in very strong. It was almost like a phone call, you know? So I would go into the closet, leave a little treat there, or just take a moment to talk to them or to connect with them. When I was a kid, I used to sing. I would sing for them and dance for them. Like I would put on full-on concerts. I was just the fairy entertainer. So I would sometimes then just like start dancing with them, just doing whatever called me to connect with them. And I started noticing a big shift in the energy of my space, where it felt very clearly, is this even? I think so. Where it felt very clearly like mischievous, like silly, goofy. It was very clearly fairy energy in there. At that point, that was kind of the most interaction I had. When I was little, I was really obsessed with like trying to build some sort of relationship with fairies, but with them, it's like a stray cat or something. You know, you really have to build trust. Sometimes it takes time, especially if it's like with a cat that's not that used to humans. They can come around, you know, but it's kind of on their own terms, and there's nothing you can really do to force it. I was very passionate about connecting to them, so I would consistently, like, everything I did was for them and, like, dedicated to them. I spoke about this on the podcast before, but when I was about, I was first introduced to fairies when I was about, like, I think literally out of the womb. I've always had a awareness of fairies and a connection to them. I've always been very interested in them, felt very at home with their energy. I think probably when I was about 4 or 3, I think 4 is when I was first taught to leave offerings for them. My mom told me to put some, I don't know, some sort of treat in the closet. I wonder if that's where my association with closets came from. I never thought about that. She told me to put a little treat in the closet for Tinkerbell, and that Tinkerbell would leave me a gift in return. And she told me to go check under the, my pillow on my bed. Check under my pillow and see if the gift was there. And I looked under my pillow and there were Tinkerbell stickers. So from that moment, I was like, oh my gosh, fairies are the coolest things in the whole world. I just want to connect to them all day, every day. For the tooth fairy even, I had a very close relationship with her. More so than just teeth. I would make her little collages and stuff and put them under my pillow, and then I would get a little letter back. And there was one time, I was a snooper. When I was a kid, I was a snooper. I wanted to be a secret agent, so I would spy on... I've never done this before, and this looks crazy. What did I just do? I watched this YouTube video that was like, oh, carve out your eyes. And I wanted to see what would happen. That is not cute. Oh my god. Why did I do that? I thought, you know what, I should probably test this first before committing. But I was like, fuck it, let's just commit, and that looks crazy. I'm gonna look like I'm kind of going for like a Tim Burton vibe, I guess, so I'll just go for it. Hollowed out eyes. I'm just gonna rock it. We're gonna own it. This lighting does not look good. That's okay. Okay. So, with the tooth fairy, so I would snoop in my mom's closet. My poor parents. And one day, I found a box of my teeth. And naturally, because I'm Amber, I was like, oh my god, my mom is the tooth fairy. So I called my friend and was like, you're never gonna believe this. I was in my mom's closet and I found a bunch of teeth. And I had counted them. And there wasn't enough for it to be mine. I'm putting glitter over my eyelid in case you're curious. So I was like, okay, she's just collecting everybody's teeth. And my friend at the time was my little fairy buddy. She also believed in fairies. We actually had a very interesting thing happen at her house where I think, when did I know her? I was probably about, no, she was 7. It was like 9, I think. Yeah. I was over at her house and we kept hearing this giggling. So, of course, it's like, oh, that's a fairy. We kept hearing footsteps running. When I was a kid, I was the weirdo I was obsessed with fairies. I literally asked my teacher if I could do a presentation after recess to show everybody that fairies were real. I was obsessed with them and was adamant about proving to people that they were real. When I go to people's houses, it's like, okay, we're going to do a fairy search. Like, we're connecting to fairies. We're turning into fairies. We are going to channel the energy and be them and see them and feel them. We're going to leave offerings for them. Like, I was a fairy nerd. So when I was at her house, we were probably putting out the intention to find some fairies. And we started to hear these footsteps, just like stomping around the house. This laughing, the screen door would shut by itself. A lot of interesting things were happening. And I know that her mom was similar to my mom in encouraging the existence of fairies, but I don't actually know if her mom was planting this stuff or if it was real, because we were so young and it's easy to hoodwink children. But it was a little bit too bizarre with the running and stuff like that and the giggling. So we were trying to find this little thing because we thought there was like a little leprechaun or something running around the house. This lighting is terrible. We had gone with her mom to go to the grocery store or something, and in the car, in the back seat where we were sitting, there was this little sign that was written in like crayon or something in like messed up letters that was like, "Help me, I'm trapped," or something like that. I don't remember what it was. And we're like, holy fuck, this is the little fairy guy that was running around. He's stuck in the house. He can't get out. I still don't know exactly what happened. I don't know if it was her mom. I don't think so, because she wasn't in the car before we had gotten in the car. I need better lighting in here. I think this is okay. So when we got back, we put out a little bowl of fruit and nuts and stuff like that and opened the screen door because we thought that he had gotten stuck inside or something. And we had been hearing like slamming of the screen door or like moving around the screen door. So when I had told this friend of mine that my mom was the tooth fairy, I think she had told her mom, she's like, oh my gosh, Amber's mom is the tooth fairy. Oh no, what had happened was I was writing to the tooth fairy. I'd write her little letters and she would write letters back, and she was talking about her fairy friend, her siblings. Her name was Serenity, and she had like two sisters. One was named like Riven, and I don't remember the other one's name. And so my friend started to write letters to the tooth fairy as well. But the letter she received back was that her fairy's name was Lavender. So I thought there was a whole network of tooth fairies then, and my mom was just one of them. There was a lavender bush outside of my friend's bedroom window. We would sometimes find these like little golden hairs that we thought were belonging to fairies. Okay, I think we're fine. This lighting is still weird here. Here, I think it looks okay. Here, it's a little funky, but that's all right. Oh, you know what's interesting? Whenever I was a kid, so I would go to friends' houses, and we would play fairies. And I would tell them that if we would pretend to be fairies, there was something that would happen to me where I started speaking in a British accent. I couldn't really help it. It would just happen naturally. It was like I was channeling them. And then my friends would follow suit. I'm not sure if they would follow suit because they're just copying me or if we were actually trans-channeling something together. But I had this friend named Jacqueline. and I was at her house one time. My mom was practicing angel Wicca at the time. So growing up, I no longer practice witchcraft. I just have like a spiritual practice. My dad practices shamanism, and then my mom is more in the realm of like Wicca stuff. So we all kind of have our own categories. But my mom growing up did angel Wicca, so I considered myself to also be Wiccan, and I had these little books on like spells and little stuff like that. So whenever I'd have a sleepover with somebody, I would bring this little book of spells. We would pick one to do, and we'd do it. They were always very innocent spells. I was taught, that you don't do anything that messes with anybody's free will. You have to be respectful. So all of the spells were essentially just like affecting us. So I was spending the night at my friend Jacqueline's house. I had this spell for like beauty, where you put some water, essentially just make moon water. There's a little spell that we would say. We'd leave the moon water there, or we'd put the water out in the moon overnight, and then in the morning we would come and wash our face with it. So we did that. I think we may have done one other spell. I don't remember what it was. But I really wanted to see a fairy with her, and every time I would spend the night at somebody's house, there's a movie called A Fairy Tale, which is a famous story from England, I think, where these little girls had captured fairies. They had taken a picture of them, and there was this whole thing where like Houdini got involved, and they were trying to figure out if these were real or fake. And the movie is essentially about how they had befriended the fairies. They had a deep relationship with them and stuff like that. And there's a song that they would do to invoke them. And the first time I saw this movie, I wrote that little song down, and it was, "Come out from your fairy bower, come upon this golden hour, come to me, I beg you please, fairies dancing on the breeze." I used to go outside, and I would sing that, and I would wait for the wind to start. And typically, the more I repeated it, the more the wind would start blowing, which I always assumed was a sign from the fairies saying that they were there. And it was always very interesting, because literally every time I would do it, the wind would pick up. So I'd go to a friend's house, we'd go outside, we'd sing the song, and we'd wait. We'd play fairies, we'd do whatever we could to connect to the Fae energy and embody them. And with Jacqueline, a lot of times there were things that would fly by. It'd be like a hummingbird or a dragonfly, and we'd be like, oh my gosh, what if that's a fairy in disguise? But when I was with Jacqueline this one time, we both literally saw this thing fly that was clearly not a insect or bird. It was this weird, like, bright red, it's like a scarlet red thing, probably about the size of maybe a little bigger than a hummingbird, but it flew. We saw it very clearly, and we were trying to chase it. I had this book, I think when I was a kid, that said if you see a fairy, don't blink, because if you blink, they're going to disappear. They're gonna use their glamour, which is what their magic is called, to make themselves go back into an energetic state. So you have to keep your eyes open. So anytime I was looking for fairies, I would I would stare and try my hardest not to blink. So we kept looking for some. I was convinced, me and my friend Monessa, I don't know, she's actually the one I had seen A Fairy Tale with. She's the one where I wrote down the thing. We went outside and did it for the first time. But with Monessa, I'm not sure exactly what happened. I know I said it. I don't know where I got the idea, but I started feeling this interesting pressure in my back after really connecting to fairies for the first time with that little song. And so I thought that I was turning into a fairy, and she felt some sort of pressure on her back as well. So I was like, oh my gosh, you're turning into one too. We have to like help our energetic wings develop. So I would try to massage the wings, thinking it would stimulate growth. I would go like this. So I would massage her wings, and then she would massage mine. And so whenever I would go to a friend's house, like at Jacqueline's, I told her, like, hey, I'm actually secretly turning into a fairy. If you want to turn into one too, you can. Let's try to make ourselves fly. So we would jump off of high things, not too high, but a little high, and see if we would float a little bit. And it never really worked too well. I don't remember actually. I know there were a couple times where I was like, I think I levitated for just a split second. But I'm not sure because I was so young. But when I was 9, it was all around this time. I had this little coin machine. I've talked about this on my podcast. That would light up anytime you put a coin in it. You put a coin in, it'd like go down this little spiral, and then it'd fall on the bottom, and it'd light up and go do-do-do-do-do. And it would do it by itself all the time. And growing up, I wasn't allowed to have electronics because they would turn on and play Hush Little Baby. The batteries would be out. They wouldn't even be programmed to play that song, yet somehow they all found a way to play it. So anytime things turned on, it freaked me out. I didn't know what it was. The Hush Little Baby thing freaked everybody out, so I never associated it with anything good. Unfortunately, my first experience with energy was when I was about 2, and it was a poltergeist. It was a really bad haunting we had. I talk about this on my podcast too, if you want to listen to it. There's an episode specifically called like Poltergeist. I think that's when I also spoke about my experience with Bloody Mary. I think I need more blush. No, we'll keep it somber. This bottom eyeshadow stuff actually doesn't look too bad. It looks hollowed, which is what I was going for. It looks better in real life than on this. Anyways, so the thing would go off, I would get freaked out, and my mom told me, it was nothing to be. Okay. There is a thing right in front of me. I'm about to get emotional. There's a little thing right in front of me. It's this little, actually, let me see if I can show you guys. Okay, so this is what I put my crystals in. As long as I've had this little thing, it's very small, it would open by itself. And whenever it would open, it was a sign that the fairies were kind of going in and opening it. They would always just go and play with the crystals. That little ship that's on top of it was just moving. It was just wobbling. But anyways, so I had this little machine that would go off. I've said that now 5 times. And my mom told me that it was nothing to be concerned with. It was just my fairies that were playing with it. And it's like my guardians or angels or whatever. So to show me, I shouldn't have done that. I'm literally like a child with makeup. This is powder. This isn't this isn't a cream. I just wanted to add a bit more. Let me see if I could buff this in somehow. Let me do it to the other side so it's even. So I went with my mom up to the thing, and she's like, no, it's nothing to worry about. Look, I'll stand there with you, and we'll ask them to do it again, and you'll see that there's nothing freaky up here. So we went up, and we asked them to, keep going. We were standing there watching it, and it kept going off, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. So I was like, okay, I'll stay here and watch it for a little bit, just spend time with the energy, just to get a feel for it. And I immediately saw this little fairy materialize. It was the first time I had ever seen one physically. She had her hair half up, half down. The half up part was in a little bun, and she was glowing yellow. She was sitting on this little throne and playing with her hair. She was very small. And she showed up for a quick moment, and then she disappeared again. And that was the first time I saw a real life fairy. And then I don't remember if the thing with Jacqueline happened before or after, but anywho, I didn't see any physically besides those. I would just get signs such as the closet door opening or things in my closet moving around. I always had physical signs of them, or I would feel them, or I would communicate with them through the wind, stuff like that. And you can clearly see this line. Oh, Amber, what are you doing? It's getting too confident in my playing. Oh well. Now it looks like I just have weird cheek coloring. It's okay. When I was then I think when I was about 16 is when I started focusing on my spiritual stuff. I spoke about this on the pod too. I had this experience at my aunt's house, who has a lot of fairy energy, where my mom and I were sleeping on a blow-up mattress in the living room, and I saw I would always see this fairy kind of pop out from the hallway. And there was one time my mom was going to sleep, and I was just watching her, and I saw her spirit fly up through the ceiling. I was scared that she was dying, but she immediately started snoring. And then the fairy that I would see that would pop in came out from the closet, or from the hallway rather, walked over to me, stared at me. He just hobbled over and peered down and was looking at me. And then he turned around and went back, and I looked over and I saw 30 different fairies filling the walls of the dining room. I saw them all very physically. It was dark, but I could still make them out. And I felt this overwhelming sensation of gratitude and love, like they were really welcoming me into their realm. And that is something that I had always wanted. I worked really hard to try to befriend them. This felt like the moment of them really embracing me and, kind of welcoming me. And from that moment, and then I saw my mom's energy fly back from the ceiling into her body, and then she woke up and was like, oh, are you okay? And I was like, oh my gosh, has just had this crazy thing happen. And from that moment forward, I would see them all the time. And now I see them very physically and have many moments of contact with them. I love them very much, and I highly recommend tapping into them. Like I said, it can take a little bit of work, but just putting out little treats for them, taking moments to connect with them, to dance with them, to sing with them, caring for wildlife. I have a bunch of podcasts about how to tune into the fairy realm, but they're just so magical, and I love them so much. So I just wanted to talk about them real quick. Thanks for being here. I appreciate you all. I'm sending you so much love. I hope you connect to some fairies today. I should stop doing this because I'm just gonna fuck it up, but no, that's okay. Okay, I love you, friends. Thanks for being here. Thanks for getting ready with me. I'll see you soon.